I'm Patricia Nauman. I'm the Executive Director of Metro Cities, and also on this meeting with me, our A team is here, which we have a very wonderful A team. Jennifer Dorn, our Office Manager, Mike Lund, Government Relations Specialist, and Anya McDonnell, Government Relations Specialist. And between Mike, Anya, and I, we cover the gamut of the legislative and regional policy work. So Metro Cities is an association that represents cities throughout the 7-county metropolitan area, the shared interests of cities. We have a 19-member board that governs the work of the association, and we are very broad. We have members from across the region, from the largest cities to the smallest, all across all 7 counties, every size and shape and configuration. And we are a lobbying association. We lobby on behalf of the interests of metropolitan cities at the legislature, executive branch, and also we have the distinct, unique role that we play in representing the collective interests of cities at the Metropolitan Council. This means that we have a slate of policies that are entirely devoted to regional policymaking, regional funding, et cetera. So we work very closely as, we sort of call ourselves the watchdog. I would also expand that vastly to say we're a partner, we are a liaison. We do a lot of collaborating. I think there's probably not a day in a week that doesn't go by where we are not talking to somebody on the Met Council staff. So we have 2 staff from the Metropolitan Council. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, Lisa Barajas and Angela Torres. They will introduce themselves momentarily, but I'm just going to quickly cover what this webinar series is intended to do. And that is, we had, really Angela and I have been talking for months about hosting a webinar series like this to really provide some high-level, broad, basic information on basically regional planning, local comp planning, and their intersections, as well as the type of assistance that the Met Council provides. This is timely right now because the Met Council is in the process of now beginning to implement the Imagine 2050 regional guide. And it's also, I think, just sort of, I don't want to say inadvertently timely, but there's a lot going on at the Capitol that might relate to comp plans too. So I think just grounding folks, we want this to be open, and I'm really glad to see it. I think there's a lot of elected officials who have signed up, in addition to community development staff for cities, city managers, open to any and all who just want to broaden their understanding of these processes and how they work together. So it is my pleasure today to welcome everyone here. And I think I will turn it over to so I think somebody's already asking me. I'm just going to touch on this right now. We can deal with it more in the questions too, but there are bills, as I mentioned, at the state legislature that are really what we call sort of zoning preemption, land use preemption bills. The goal is noble. Everybody's interested in providing housing and advancing housing. We have opposed those bills because they really do preempt local authority. And in addition to that, they would really, I believe, preempt the regional authority, the ability of cities to work with the Met Council on comp plans in a streamlined, sort of productive way. Those bills would really usurp those processes in very major ways. And we are working very concertedly with legislators to hopefully not get bills that do that, because the bills that would do that would basically provide a statewide overlay that would basically sort of, like I said, usurp or eliminate or impede the regional and local work that goes on in the metropolitan area. And we do have updates in our newsletter on the bills. So happy to answer any questions, or if you want to put something in the chat. But for now, I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to either Lisa or Angela. I think we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end too, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll certainly try to we will watch the chat as well. So I will turn it over.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Patty. I'll just ask Lisa, maybe do you want to introduce yourself just briefly before I start sharing?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I had to look just to make sure we were afternoon today. I'm Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of the Community Development Division here at the Council. I've been with the Council for multiple rounds of regional planning now. This will be my 3rd round. And so I'm really excited about sharing with you all today some of our baseline information as you all are embarking upon your local planning process.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everybody. I'm Angela Torres. I'm the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance at the Metropolitan Council in the Community Development Division, working under Lisa. I have been at the council also for a very long time. My first years of planning were as a consultant doing a local comprehensive plan on the city and township side of things. I've also been a local planner at a city as well. So have a full gamut of experience. I've been at the council now 13 years. This is the beginning of my second round of comp planning at the council. So just really glad to see everybody and looking forward to the conversation. Patty, you're right. We did save time at the end, hopefully for discussion questions. I'm going to share my screen now. Please let me know if you can see that and whether or not.
Yep, we can see that.
Okay, and it's just the PowerPoint.
Yep, it's just the PowerPoint now.
Okay.
Presentation mode. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so this session really introduces the council's role in shaping long-term growth across the Twin Cities region. Patty mentioned that it was part of a three-part series. This is the first one, really kind of foundations of regional planning, some history, and why regional planning is the approach here in the Metro. The next session in April, save the date, and we'll have more information about that at the end, is on comprehensive planning. That'll get into more of the technical aspects of what local governments are expected to do in the comprehensive plan itself, what's included and what's the purpose of a comprehensive plan. And then the technical assistance for comprehensive planning. We know that comp planning is a very intensive process for local governments. It takes several years for local governments to do that. And the Met Council has a ton of technical assistance and resources to help local governments meet those requirements. So want to make sure that we're not getting down in the weeds today. We're still at the high level of talking about the foundations of regional planning today, but we will get into some more technical aspects of things in future sessions. So we look forward to seeing you at those sessions. With that, I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Angela. We're going to tag team a little bit today too, and I'm going to pre-apologize. I'm getting over a cold. I thought I was better. And of course, once we start to log in, then I have to have some coffee, so I will mute myself whenever I need to cough just to save all of your ears. But just some foundations, as many of you know, the metropolitan region is defined in state law actually as part of the Metropolitan Council's responsibilities. It includes our 7 counties. Here on this slide, there are 181 cities and townships in our region. We have 3 major rivers, as you all know. In fact, is the naming convention for one of our regional parks districts as well. And we have more than 3.2 million people today living in this region, in the 7-county region. And we'll get into this detail a little bit more, but we're projecting growth of an additional 657,000 people by 2050. Next slide, please. So we'll review a little bit about what the council does, why we do those things, and dive a little bit more into the regional planning context, because it really is the framework for all of the work that we do in this region and how, and the definition, even in law, between our relationships between regional planning and local planning. So we're give you some foundation on how we got here today. Some of you may know this, it's always a good refresh, but the council was established by the legislature in 1967. There was a lot of activity happening in this region at that time, a lot of rapid growth, a lot of fragmented development, and a lot of need for coordination around regional services. At that time, there weren't regional services, but there were a lot of independent bodies and municipalities and others providing things like sewer service, there was private transit service being provided, and another other services that weren't happening in a coordinated fashion, especially given the amount of rapid growth that was happening leading up to, in the late 50s and early 60s. And so this was a big topic of civic conversation, both within the region and at the legislature. Angela, we're seeing your notes page now.
Sorry.
I'll go back to the other um,
Sorry about that.
Thank you. That's fine. But that really led to initially the establishment of independent regional agencies, with the Metropolitan Council being the planning body, and then the Metropolitan Transit Commission, the Airports Commission, the Sewer Board, and a number of other regional agencies being established at that time to coordinate those regional services. It wasn't until a little bit later that the Land Planning Act was developed, and I'll dive into that a little bit further in our slides here. But today, the primary duties of the council, as they have been evolved over time, as the legislature and civic conversation has continued to evolve, have merged many of those services into the council we have today, including managing and delivering regional wastewater services, operating the Metro Transit bus rail system, as well as our paratransit services across the region. We issue rental assistance, both state and federally funded programs for a portion of the metro area in collaboration with the other public housing agencies in the region. Again, responsible for drafting those long-range plans, and managing that orderly and economical development of the 7-county region, establishing regional policy as it relates both to that and all of the regional systems that are part of that planning process, and then planning and funding that regional parks and trail system as well. Next slide, please. As a part of that passage, the governor at the time, I think, put a really great quote, or this quote really sums up the nature of the conversation, that the purpose of the council was really to do a job which has proved to be too big for any single community, that no one community alone could solve this problem, and that it would take that coordination among communities, not just to deliver the service, but to do this in concert together, and ensuring that we're working together in that effort in this region. Next slide, please. The direction that was given to the council in statute was to create a regional development guide. Every 10 years, there's a whole series of deadlines that are identified in the plan and in statute, and references to those next steps. And that's primarily in Minnesota statutes 473851 to 871. Those responsibilities also include provisioning and planning for the regional systems of transportation and aviation, water resources, and regional parks and trails, developing housing and land use policy to guide orderly development, and creating a regional development guide that kind of sums all of that up. The council also serves as a metropolitan planning organization, the MPO, for the Twin Cities metro region. That MPO designation is a federally mandated policymaking board that serves a variety of purposes. The council has already been directed in state law to manage transportation functions before the federal program was developed. So that was a natural fit for the council's work, given that state direction already. And that includes regional decision-making on transportation and distributing federal transportation funding through the Transportation Advisory Board as the main body there. The council serves a variety of other roles, providing transit and wastewater services as well. And in 1994, the council began delivering transit services through Metro Transit after merging with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And in the same year, the council also merged with the Metropolitan Waste Control Commission to provide wastewater service to areas of the region within the Metropolitan Urban Service Area. The 90s were really formative. That was also around the time when the Livable Communities Act was also passed. That's where we have our grant making functions to support the development and small area planning and other table setting activities in your communities as well. Next slide, please. So I'll dive a little bit more now into our regional planning approach. after talking about the council, but more specifically, how do we get into regional planning and what does that mean? Back in after the establishment of the council in 1967, while we were organized amongst regional agencies for coordinating those systems and ensuring that those were happening together, the civic conversation continued to try to grapple with how to actually handle and coordinate that regional decision making and provision of services with local decision making, and really how to handle growth and development across the region. So that led ultimately to the passage of the Metropolitan Land Planning Act in 1976. And as a part of that, the legislature found that communities within this region are interdependent, that decisions made in one community had impacts to their neighbors, but also communities across the region as well around land use and development, that individual communities, their decision making also had impacts on and demands for the region's infrastructure, and that growth within the region would continue to create a need for public service and the coordinated delivery of those public services. Also at that time, in the years leading up to that passage of the Land Planning Act, the legislature and the region were grappling with increased risks of air and water pollution and risks of water supply shortages. These are still challenges that we see today in a different fashion and different flavors of that work, but certainly are still core to why we do regional planning, why we work with local governments and continue to address a lot of those same issues today, those regional issues that similarly have all of those kind of component ingredients of that decision making, the interrelationships among our communities, and how we together make decisions that can address some of the challenges that we face at a regional scale. So, because of all of those findings, the legislature found then that there was a essential purpose and need for regional planning to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of all the residents of the region. I think that's core to public service, and for all of you in local government is, part of your establishment as well. But then at that kind of in that blue circle that you see, specifically, this regional planning effort is really at its core is meant to ensure that coordinated, orderly, and economical development across the entire region. A number of other important regional statutes were also passed during the 1970s, as well as, and that includes the Metropolitan Parks Act, among a number of others. So, this legislative activity really reflected how much the region was grappling with new and rapid development and what leaders were looking to both manage but also protect, like things like the environment and provide for the region, ensuring things like in parks that there was a coordinated plan to ensure outdoor access for open space and recreation opportunities for a growing population in the metro area in particular. So next slide, please. This is where Angela will take over.
Yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about the regional planning cycle. So Lisa talked a lot about the history. So what does that mean? It means that we have a 10-year planning cycle. If you look at the top, it starts with the census. So every 10 years, we call it the decennial census. That leads into us developing with our stakeholders all across the region, the regional development guide. That guide is named something new every 10 years. So last decade, it was Thrive MSP 2040. And in this decade, we've, in February of last year, adopted the Imagine 2050 Regional Development Guide. That kind of prompts a couple of other things. The development of regional system plans is part of the regional development guide, I should mention. We'll talk a little bit more about how we differently coordinated all of the policy and system plans with Imagine 2050. But the development and adoption of the regional development guide means that we then have to tell local governments that the regional policies have changed, and we issue system statements as to what those policy and system plan changes mean for each individual community in in the region, 188 local jurisdictions, by the way, in the 7-county region. When we issue system statements, we then see that's the kickoff to the local process of developing an update to their comprehensive plans. We do provide a lot of training and guidelines, best practices, tools, resources for those local plan updates. But then after the plan updates are authorized, local governments move into local plan implementation. And that, of course, means any amendments to those plans, which are quite normal along the way. That's our 10-year planning cycle. All of this is driven by statute for direction on what is included in that regional development guide. Again, you'll hear us talk a lot about the orderly and economical development of the region. That's how it is stated in state statute, but it is our guiding principle. It does say that this regional development guide must include things very specifically, and then also more generally, like land use, climate and adaptation, parks and open space, etc. There are a lot of things listed in here. This is what is enabled in statute. The council, in its very first regional development guide, might have touched on things like public hospitals, libraries, and schools. That's not part of our normal practice these days, but it is in state statute. We do talk about public facilities in more general terms. Imagine 2050, the current adopted regional development guide, provides that framework for local comprehensive plans. The regional plan kind of sets the broad context, identifies the council and the community roles and the expectations for supporting forecasted growth. Forecasts are also part of what is statutorily outlined in the Metropolitan Land Planning Act for the council to issue. And then those lead into expectations for planning for regional infrastructure and connections with local infrastructure. Imagine 2040 includes all of the council's plans, programs, and actions. That does include capital plans for regional systems, probably most familiar with the regional wastewater system, and the capital plan for how that system will grow and expand. Includes both 4 and 10-year work plans. Some of the plans, like transportation and regional parks, have 4 or 5-year check-ins. The rest are updated at 10-year marks, but it also includes the council's commitments to the region. I'll turn it back over to Lisa to talk a little bit more about what is specifically in Imagine 2050 and influences on regional planning.
Great. Thanks, Angela. I just want to stress something that Angela was talking about on the last slide too, is that the regional plan is meant to be that framework for local planning to set kind of the broad context for what we're experiencing in the region, the amount of growth we might expect across this region, and these larger regional trends and challenges that we may be facing or have been facing. And even if those trends or challenges may be localized to some extent, perhaps they're sub-regional trends and challenges, is really part and parcel of how we do regional planning, is to ensure that we're addressing what's happening at that larger context and setting the stage for local comprehensive planning to fit within that framework. So as we were embarking at the council on our regional planning process, of course, setting out that vision to start with, which you can see here on the slide. As we were building this vision, our staff and our council members spent a lot of time reviewing what local comprehensive plans already say about your visions for your communities. And this is both a continuation of some of the vision that was already defined in Thrive MSP 2040, but also including and incorporating a lot of what your local plans already say around what you're trying to accomplish in your communities as well. There were some very large themes around building continued community connections and being resilient to changes that your community may be facing, ensuring that there are abundant opportunities for everyone in your community to live, work, and play and thrive. And those were things that for sure we saw consistently across plans, but also our council shares in those. So and we were hearing from residents in the region as we were engaging with residents across the region over the course of this entire planning process, their shared vision for these same kind of at that high level of what they would like to be able to say they're able to do in their communities and this region as a whole, because very few people just live in one community and never leave those borders. We are all over the place all the time. The region is our community. Next slide, please. So as we are thinking about sort of those next steps and what are we, as I mentioned earlier, what are the big challenges we are facing? The council really dug into some of those big things that we were seeing and understanding that there are lasting impacts from the pandemic and the changes across a variety of different areas in our travel patterns, how we live and work in our region, and what that means for both how we travel across our region, how we connect with one another, and also further down what people were sharing with us, with residents were sharing with us about the need for spaces for community connection, for third places, for the value that they found in things like our regional parks being a place that they could connect safely with one another, and the roles that different spaces played for them during the shutdown portion of COVID-19. But we, as our investigation moving forward and embarking on the regional planning of just trying to understand how lasting some of those impacts might be, how sticky, as some of our forecasting staff like to say, how sticky some of those things might be, and things that we continue to monitor, things we continue to be tracking, and also seeing that some of those impacts continue to be with us. We also continue to grapple in this region with persistent racial and ethnic disparities across a number of different outcomes, whether that's an income or housing and home ownership. Those disparities that we discussed in great detail as part of Thrive MSP 2040 were really just exacerbated during a lot of the COVID-19 impacts in many ways, where we did see some backsliding in places where we had made regional improve, or as a region have improved, and we saw some of that ground being lost during COVID and the impacts of shutdowns across the region. But we have disparities across a number of different areas, and we know that many communities continue to work and try different approaches, not just communities in the region, but other nonprofit organizations and other government agencies, really doing their best to try to close gaps in some of these areas and ensure that our systems aren't perpetuating those disparities, but instead making the areas where we have areas of opportunity to pull levers and make a difference, that we are making that difference. And of course, our climate is continuing to change. We live in a warming and a wetter region. I have a hard time saying that fast and say that 5 times fast. But the fact of the matter is, and we can see that today, how I know that spring in Minnesota is often sometimes winter, sometimes spring. Don't get too excited about warm weather. We'll get some snow again here real soon, as I hear. But also, we're already seeing those impacts today with a shorter winters than we have had in our historical weather patterns here, not just in the region, but across the state of Minnesota, with some of our top 10 warmest winters on record have been just in the last 15 to 20 years. And that has impacts across a number of things, not just on our recreation, but also on things like pests and impacts to our tree canopy, like emerald ash borer, because pests that would otherwise not survive a very cold winter are able to overwinter here and continue to persist and spread across our region. That has impacts on things as well, like our own infrastructure. When we have freeze-thaw cycles regularly in those winter months, or as we are wetter at flashier storms in our summer months, that those that flooding and persistent standing water can be a major issue for how we travel in this region, where we can travel, emergency services related to that, but even just for the council and how we deliver our own services, whether we need to reroute buses in an emergency because of standing water in some of our streets because of ongoing or heavy rain events. And that is a new requirement in our planning process in the cycle because of recent changes in our statutory direction that for our regional development guide that Angela reviewed just a little bit earlier today. All of these things present challenges for our region's economy as well. COVID, our disparities, and climate all have economic impacts, and they have changes and effects on our workforce for inclusion and overall workforce, differences in how our jobs are located and where they are located, and what that means for our town centers across our region, not just our big city town centers, but all of our town centers and where employment is located and what that means and how we all think about creating those vibrant spaces for communities and communities to connect with one another. So those are kind of the big trends that we see. And as we go forward, thanks, Angela, you're anticipating moving to that next slide, that then one of the first steps that we do in the process as we are embarking on our regional planning is looking forward to see how much we can expect our population to grow and our jobs to change and grow over the next 20 years through 2050. Forecasting using that decennial census as our kind of hard marker date as a starting point for saying, did we get to where we thought we were going to be when we were forecasting in the last round of planning to now, but also where can we expect to go, knowing what's happening across the nation. The Twin Cities region, like every other region, is part of, national growth trends and has lots of trends both on how our nation is growing, but also how populations move to and from different regions as well. This forecasting provides that shared foundation for our systems planning for how we coordinate that and is that shared foundation across all of our regional systems and is that basis that we use for thinking about our capital programs. The regional systems and services are scaled to meet that forecasted demand. And while many of our regional investments have lifespans beyond our planning horizon, so beyond 2050, like our regional wastewater system, that is a much longer planning horizon than 20 years. It's why we have a long-term sewer service plan as well. But those short-term capital improvements, what we need to do to ensure that we're meeting the demand where it needs to be met, is that coordinated function between what we do at the regional scale as well as what's in your local plans. And that our forecasting is a shared basis between not just our own regional systems, but also what's in your local plans. So we can ensure the delivery of regional services to meet that demand in your local units of government on a planful basis, that we're responsive and we're moving, because as many of you all know, capital planning does take time. It's hard to build the big things in a short period of time. And we want to be economical and planful about how we do that. We maintain and update our regional forecasts on a regular basis, not just once every 10 years, but are always considering those changes. So most recently have done some of that fine tuning before issuing local forecasts based on our own population estimates. And this is also directed in our state law as one of the statutory bases for how we do our work. Next slide, please. So what does it mean for this cycle? We are expecting continued growth in the Twin Cities region, but at a slower rate than what we had previously experienced and previously had forecast. We know that growth has ebbed and flowed over the last couple of decades, and we've had kind of major ups and downs, big things that affect how we grow. Many of you will know, as we were just, as you all were just submitting your 2030 comprehensive plans to us in that 2008 timeline is when we were experiencing the housing market crash, which wasn't something that we could forecast. If we had, I think we'd all be in different jobs forecasting things like that, but it certainly had an effect on what development looked like during that 2010 to 2020 decade. And then we experienced a global pandemic that has an effect on how we continue to grow and develop going forward. But also national trends is what we're seeing here as being a large impact on our forecast, on our growth rate going forward as well, is that there is a reduced amount of national growth happening that impacts how our region grows. We do, as I mentioned earlier at the start of this presentation, we do still continue to expect to add over 650,000 additional residents to our region over the planning horizon, and see some of that increasing in future decades. But at this point, we're still in that sort of post-pandemic global impact supply chain recovery, and different things can really affect that going forward. Um, and then when we break that down, our population is changing too. And many of you may be aware of this, but our population will continue to be an aging population. We'll have an increasing number of folks in the 65 plus category by the time we get to 2050, where more than 1 in 5 of our residents will be 65 plus. That has a big impact for what it means to plan for a community. That population will have potentially different needs than some of the younger age groups. Housing needs different, transportation needs different, connection to medical services or other needs. All are things that we should be considering as we're thinking forward of how we plan for communities and for the region to better serve an aging population. We see otherwise in the other segments some moderate growth in that 25 to 64, that kind of working standard working age group, but a pretty steady base in the under 25 age groups across this region. So really seeing that growth, especially in the older age groups here. This is really a culmination of social and demographic trends that are decades in the making. It's basically just math, essentially, as our forecasting team has shared. We all just add a year every year to our age. So we know about the baby boom following World War II, and those boomers are now seniors or at least 60. And then more to the point, the boomers are the first and largest generation to really enjoy that longer life expectancy that came out of our 20th century public health advances. And that's the reason that we see numbers have grown, and they'll continue to expand as those next generations meet those age groups as well. And moving ahead, our demographic modeling allows us to drill down into demographic groups as well. And because of that migration churn and also differences in birth rates across different demographic groups, we're seeing rapid growth in Asian, Latino, and Black populations going forward. In the year 2020, 900,000 residents, and in the year 2050, 1.7 million residents in those age groups. Meanwhile, the white population is largely leveled off over this planning horizon. So that direction that we're heading of becoming an increasingly diverse region is already apparent in our school systems. That school populations are already more diverse, and those are the adults of the future who are the folks who will be having the families of the future as well. So we will continue to see that growth, and we saw in the 2020 census that we were nearly 30% people of color in that 2020 decade or time point. And by 2050, we're projecting that to be 45% people of color in this region. So that's a lot of meaning for how we plan for and connect to residents, how we engage community in this region, what different ethnic groups may have for their family needs may vary across that. So really setting the stage for how we should be thinking about and planning, not just for housing needs, but also for our own economy, where we continue to see those persistent challenges and differences in employment rate and education rates among groups that we should be thinking about as we're engaging on these processes. So as we had talked through some of this particular slide is a little more detailed, but really breaking this down, this slide is reorganizing all of that population into households and types of households. And as we talked about, I talked about that 657,000 persons growth, but we also forecast it into households, and that's about 320,000 new households that we're expecting to grow over this time period. What you notice here is that and what is growing fast and what is not growing fast. And as you're aware, we talked about that senior population growing, that senior headed households number will also almost double during this time period. And I do have to say that this is because of baby boomers aging, advancing from under 65 years old to over 65. It's not because new senior households are moving here for our sunny beaches, although I think our beaches are pretty great, but that's not where that growth is coming from. It's just that sort of demographic change. The demographic has far less net growth. The one that does is under 65, that market segment. And in particular, the gold colored time series that you see in here, so that one right in the center, that's our that largest bar on those chart, that's the working age, family age households with 3 or more people. Historically, this has been sort of the bread and butter target market for especially single family home builders. But looking to this future, looking to the future and forecasting, we see that this segment is barely expanding over this time horizon. So the big idea or takeaway from this is that market for single family detached homes has some limited growth. It's not no growth, but only 30% of new metro area housing that we've seen in the past decade, and probably only 30 or 33% of what we'll see going forward. So this has implications for different parts of our region as well. And as you're digging into and engaging with your residents and thinking about where we're at, those are some of the things that we need to think about as you're considering what are the housing needs for your community in particular going forward. We're setting the regional context here for you. Next slide, please. So after all of that regional context and adding all of these more than 320,000 households through 2050, question usually is, well, where? We use a model, a real estate market-based model that includes a number of different models within that's really designed to produce a probable future distribution. And that includes a number of different elements about what we know about the region as well, what you tell us. We work with a lot of staff planners as well about especially new development in the pipeline to help inform this work. But what we see in aggregate is that we're seeing about 33% of that net household growth will be happening in urban and urban edge communities, a little less than a quarter happening in our suburban communities, 38% happening in suburban edge communities, and about 6% of the region's growth happening in the rural portions of the region. This pattern is about 8 points less urban than in the 2040 cycle of planning, about 6 points more suburban than that last cycle, and a little bit more rural than observed development than during that 2010 to 2020 decade. So with that, I will turn it over to Angela.
Yes. So the regional context really impacts how and we think about doing planning and how those plans actually come to fruition. We actually started working on what would eventually be the Imagine 2050 Regional Development Guide in 2018. You might remember that that's just as local governments were wrapping up their 2040 comprehensive plans. So there's never an end to the planning work. But the last regional development guide, Thrive MSP 2040, was adopted in a series of individual system and policy plans, kind of all with different adoption timelines. For Imagine 2050, we took a different approach. We looked at an integrated multidisciplinary approach based on a foundation of analysis and research to identify what those existing conditions and emerging changes to the regional landscape were. We developed a regional vision, values, and goals with an extensive kind of over 2-year engagement effort, centering resident voices and experiences in this work, taking to what we learned from local government priorities from the 2040 planning cycle, which I mentioned was just concluding at that point. Each of the policy chapters integrated regional goals for a consistent focus on planning outcomes for the region. This really required a collaborative approach across all of the policy areas to coordinate shared terminology, shared outcomes for land use, housing, parks, water, and transportation policy development with objectives, policies, and actions. And then for the 3 system plans of parks, water, and transportation, also including system investments. But Imagine 2050 was adopted in February of 2025 as a comprehensive plan for the region. Local governments do comprehensive planning, and so does the council. Given the regional context that Lisa just shared with you, the council developed these regional goals. These 5 areas consistently emerged as cross-cutting issues across all of the policy areas. Our region is equitable and inclusive. Our communities are healthy and safe. Our region is dynamic and resilient. We lead on addressing climate change, and we protect and restore natural systems, are the 5 kind of guiding forces for all of the policy and system plans. The regional goals build off of what we heard in all of the engagement efforts based on our own experiences across the council in direct service. We also reviewed local comprehensive plans to identify what local priorities and local visions for their communities were. These goals are really meant to capture and address big issues facing the region today that no one community, no one organization, no one division of the council could address or solve on their own. We both experience impacts across areas of responsibility in each of these goals and have opportunities to advance regional goals across all of the policy areas: housing, parks, land use, transportation, and water. I'll just briefly talk through the 5 policy plans. I know we want to get to some questions, so I'll move pretty quickly. The land use policy reflects a respect for the relationship with land and water as a foundation for regional growth that Lisa was talking about. And these are the ways in which the land use policy plan outlines how that would happen. The water policy reflects a focus on high quality water, a healthy environment, and public health, focusing on climate resilient water resources, optimizing our infrastructure investments, promoting universal accessibility, maintaining strategies that foster collaboration across political boundaries. The water group had some really successful sub-regional water engagement efforts, and they're continuing to do that work, but then also integrating water management from water supply to wastewater systems to surface waters. One water. The transportation policy plan reflects a focus on access for people and businesses to get where they need to be with choices on how to get there, thinking about efficient, safe, and comfortable experiences in the transportation system, those funding programs that we have at the council that help support those systems, partnerships to serve people and reduce emissions, evaluating effectively how the work is done, ensuring community benefits equally, and measuring how we're improving equitable access to transportation as well. The Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan reflects a focus on connecting people with the natural world, providing financial support to park implementing agencies to protect the integrity of the system. That partnership is very important, and strategies to increase resilience to climate change and using data to better inform decision-making and planning. The Housing Policy Plan reflects a focus on safe, dignified, affordable housing choices for everyone, reinforcing the right to housing and reflecting priorities learned from residents of the region, identifying 3 priorities related to proximity and choice, dignity and decency, and connection and well-being. I want to just emphasize again the save the date. We have 2 more of these educational series, one on comprehensive planning, one on technical assistance for comp planning. You'll get notifications about those and about a larger program for local government staff that are actually doing the technical aspects of comprehensive planning, called the PlanIt series, and events and webinars and opportunities for the next 2 years that we will roll out as well. This is just one aspect of that. But I'll wrap up there and ask for questions. I'll stop sharing. Just want to say before those questions come in that yes, we will, this session has been recorded. We will share out the PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, our contact information is here and we are happy to help.